Hi, I'm Shaan, and I'm with Jerry. Jerry's Senior Product Designer for AutoCAD. What I want to talk about was one of the great new features of AutoCAD 2010, and that's parametrics and constraints. Jerry is one of the brains behind this functionality. He knows it inside and out. So I wanted to kind of pick and find out and get some tips on this, Jerry. Can you tell us the background?
Well, I guess we should start with the definition of what parametric drawing is. And at a high level, you could say it's the ability to add intelligence to the drawing so that it can help maintain design intent while you're editing geometry. More specifically, it's the support of what we call constraints. And constraints establish a relationship between two objects or between 2 points on objects. And the constraints can be geometric or they can be dimensional. And geometric constraints are things like perpendicular or horizontal or tangencies between objects. And I like to think of them as persistent object snaps. So, for example, we're all familiar with object snaps. You know, you snap the endpoint of a line to another line. Well, if you add a coincident constraint to that, the lines stay connected. So when you move one, the other moves with it or stretches. Now, dimensional constraints are similar, except the relationship is a dimensional relationship, which establishes, controls the distance between objects or of an object, controls the angle, the radius of arcs or circles. And when you edit geometry that has dimensional constraints, the dimensions are enforced. And if you edit the value of the dimensional constraint, then the geometry updates. So when you think of associative dimensions, those are often called driven dimensions because they respond to changes in geometry. Dimensional constraints are the opposite. You change the value of the dimensional constraint and it drives the geometry.
These are the things that people go, when I first tried AutoCAD, that's what I thought I could do. I could change the dimension. And
Right. No.
So now we're there.
We're there.
Can you give me any tips on constraining? I mean, is there big drawings? You know, if you have a whole bunch of polylines, that's probably not a good idea to auto-constrain these things.
Right. Well, there are a number of...
What is auto-constraining?
Okay. Well, when you want to apply constraints to geometry, there's a number of ways you can do it. The easiest way is through a command called auto-constrain. And so that command takes a selection set of objects and it just analyzes the geometry and applies the constraint if the geometry already adheres to it. In addition to that, you can individually apply constraints. So 2 lines, they're not parallel. You can select them and make them parallel. Dimensional constraints, they work just like dimensions. The command prompts are almost identical. The things about dimensional constraints is that all dimensional constraints have a name. And they're listed in what we call a parameter manager, and hence the name parametric drawing, because you're managing the drawing through named dimensional constraints. You also can have user parameters that you can give names to. And what really makes the feature powerful is that you can combine these dimensional constraints and user parameters with arithmetic operations and trigonomic functions so that it can do powerful and wonderful things.
Yeah, I've seen examples of driving maybe like a worm gear, right? And controlling the teeth and everything from a table, the number of teeth, the pitch, the angles.
Right.
And you can get even beyond that. Now, you can lock some of these, too. You can fix them.
Actually, that's one of the recommended practices. When you start constraining geometry, your geometry is partially constrained. You start editing things, the geometry starts to move around because there are generally lots of different valid solutions for partially constrained geometry. So we recommend that you start fixing some of the geometry. And you can fix the point on geometry or you can fix the object. And then as you change dimensional constraint values or edit the geometry, it's moving relative to some fixed location. You're more likely to get a predictable result.
How do I know if it's constrained?
Well, we have a UI that you can turn on and off. We display them as little constraint bars. They can be moved around. When you roll over these constraint bars, it highlights the geometry. It's very intuitive.
So it's like Inventor, where it'll show parallel, and you roll over the one, and it'll show which other one it's
That's
parallel
correct.
to?
As a matter of fact, we purposely tried to make the UI in AutoCAD for constraints consistent with Inventor. So if you're working with AutoCAD and moving into Inventor, the experience will be very natural and vice versa.
Excellent. Any other tips? I mean, you've got constraints and dynamic blocks now, too.
That's true. Well, just one more tip is that when you constrain geometry, we make it very easy to add and remove constraints. And if you have problems with the geometry when it's constrained, we have the ability to relax the constraints. So just by tapping the Control key, you can make the geometry behave like it used to. When we relax a constraint, after you do the edit, AutoCAD reevaluates the geometry, and if the constraint still applies, it keeps it. If it doesn't apply, it is removed.
Very good.
This whole system works in the block editor as well. And as a matter of fact, I think that's where some real power will be. The commands act the same. Geometric constraints are the same. Dimensional constraints we've enhanced because when you create a dimensional constraint in the block editor, the parameter name actually becomes a property of the block reference. That's how it's exposed.
Right. So it's very, very powerful in what you can do.
It's powerful. You learn it in one environment, you can move to the other environment very easily.
Yeah, this is one of those features where it can sometimes, hard to apply to what you do, but once you get your head around it, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'm real anxious to see how our customers will use the feature.
Well, the beta customers have given it thumbs up, so this is a good sign.
It's great to hear. It's great to see the enthusiasm.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Shaan.